Starmer's government signs off on a deal with Mauritius, handing over the Chagos Islands, with outgoing US President Joe Biden giving it the green light as well. Now, if you're wondering why this tiny group of islands in the Indian Ocean would even catch Trump's attention, let me tell you, these islands are more than just remote territory. The Diego Garcia atoll, in particular, is a military goldmine for the US. It's smack dab in a position that gives the US access to Southeast Asia, letting them run strategic operations, keep tabs on rivals, and project power across the Indian Ocean. It's been a critical hub for American ships, long-range bombers, and other military operations. Simply put, it's not just a base, it's a massive US security asset that the Pentagon wouldn't want to give up for anything. Now, Trump isn't just miffed about this deal, he's absolutely alarmed. The idea of control shifting to Mauritius has him and his entire security team raising red flags. And here's why. With Mauritius at the helm, there's a risk, or at least Trump's team thinks so, that China could swoop in, maybe not militarily, but in that subtle, sneaky way they do, and gather intelligence on US military movements. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio have jumped on this too. They're seeing potential Chinese influence around every corner. Imagine what a surveillance operation out of Diego Garcia would mean for US defenses in the region. It would be like a glaring hole in America's strategy. To Waltz and Rubio, that isn't just inconvenient, it's a nightmare, and this isn't just speculation for Trump's people. It's a fundamental national security issue, as they see it. Now fast forward to Trump's message to Starmer. Trump, freshly re-elected and already in full America First mode, is sending a crystal clear signal. Don't mess with US strategic assets. In other words, if it's even remotely a threat to American power or security, Trump's not interested. The idea of another nation, even an ally like the UK, potentially giving China an opportunity to pry open American defenses, Trump's basically saying, no way. He's warning that if the deal isn't halted or reshaped, his administration will be ready to slap a veto on it as soon as he's back in office. That's not just policy, it's a hard line. And here's what's particularly wild. Trump's closest allies are matching his intensity, maybe even adding fuel to the fire. They're not just grumbling about this behind closed doors, they're putting it right out there. For them, the Chagos deal is a red line. The UK handing over the islands is seen as a glaring signal that maybe the special relationship isn't so special when it comes to American military interests. Trump's circle is worried this move by the UK could open the floodgates to other allies getting too cozy with US adversaries, and as far as they're concerned, that's unacceptable. So, at its core, Trump's veto threat isn't just him reacting to a diplomatic issue, it's him drawing a boundary. His message to Starmer is blunt. The US won't stand by while its strategic interests are put at risk, even if that means pushing back on one of its oldest allies. It's a bold, America-centric move, a reminder that under Trump, every international deal is weighed against the America First agenda. And for Trump, America First means not only staying on top, but blocking any potential threat to that position, even if it comes from an ally making deals with another friendly nation. All right, let's get into this next layer of drama, because we've got some serious British firebrands joining the Trump chorus. Nigel Farage and Priti Patel are coming in hot, rallying behind Trump with critiques that add fuel to an already burning issue. First, we've got Farage, the perennial Brexit crusader, hopping onto YouTube to deliver a searing takedown of the Chagos deal. In true Farage fashion, he doesn't hold back. His central argument is that Mauritius has no legitimate claim to the islands. Forget international consensus or historical ties. Farage's stance is blunt. These islands should stay under British and American control, no exceptions. And Farage doesn't stop at a quick critique. He's made it clear that handing over the islands to Mauritius is, in his view, a massive sellout of British interests. What's fascinating is that he's tying this directly to security concerns that mirror Trump's own worries about China. He's arguing that by relinquishing control, the UK isn't just giving up territory, it's potentially opening the door to Chinese influence in a region where Western military interests have been unchallenged for decades. This message is crafted to resonate with a British public that's wary of any deal that looks like a concession. And then, Farage really twists the knife, saying that the people of the Chagos Islands, who've been British subjects for years, actually prefer British governance. According to Farage, this whole deal isn't just a diplomatic error, it's a direct slap in the face to these people who he claims would rather remain under British protection than see a transfer to Mauritius. Next up, we've got Priti Patel. Now, Patel isn't just any politician, She's known for her hardline stances on immigration, law and order, and, more importantly, she's a former Home Secretary with deep roots in British conservative circles. So, when she comes out swinging against this deal, it's not just political noise, it's a heavy-hitting critique that's impossible for Starmer to ignore. Patel's point is blunt and unfiltered. By agreeing to this deal, Labour is compromising the UK's defence strategy and weakening British sovereignty. To her, this isn't just an island handover, it's a strategic blunder that risks exposing the UK's defences at a time when global tensions are already high. She's talking about the Chagos Islands as a vital chess piece in Britain's broader defence puzzle, and she's positioning Starmer as the guy who's willing to knock that piece off the board for the sake of appeasing international critics. What makes Patel's critique sting even more is her alignment with Trump's warnings. She's not speaking in vague terms, she's specifically calling out the potential for Chinese influence, hammering home the idea that this isn't just about territorial control, but about the security threats that come with it. In Patel's eyes, Starmer is giving away more than land. He's putting the UK at risk of ceding influence in a region that's crucial to Western security interests. And her words are landing with an impact, because she's not just criticising Starmer's judgment, she's framing him as the leader willing to jeopardise the safety and security of the UK, which resonates deeply with conservative audiences. So here's where things get even more interesting. Farage and Patel aren't just speaking to British viewers, they're essentially playing to Trump's camp, which is a unique twist. Trump's supporters in the US are loving this because it reinforces Trump's message of strong national security and puts Starmer in a tough spot domestically. With Farage and Patel's backing, Trump's position doesn't just look like an isolated American viewpoint, it suddenly has the weight of prominent British voices behind it, voices that echo his own warnings about China and strategic control. This alignment could complicate Starmer's position within the UK, especially as conservative voices rally against the Chagos deal. Alright, let's talk about the broader implications here, because this is way bigger than a single island deal. The UK and the US have what's famously known as the special relationship, that historically tight bond that's been in place through thick and thin, from Ubita coups right up through recent conflicts. But Trump's veto threat is putting this relationship on seriously shaky ground. This isn't just a disagreement over some policy detail, it's a full-blown test of how resilient the UK-US alliance really is when it comes to core interests. Diego Garcia is smack in the middle of this, and it's no ordinary military base. It's one of the US's most strategically valuable assets, vital for projecting power across the Indian Ocean and beyond. If Trump follows through with a veto, it's going to shake up traditional intelligence sharing, military cooperation, and possibly even the frequency of joint operations. It's like Trump is saying, if you don't back off, maybe we need to rethink what special means in this relationship. And that's a threat that goes right to the heart of UK-US relations, because traditionally, these two countries have stood by each other no matter what. But Trump's whole approach to ally relations has never been conventional. He's shown time and again that he's willing to shake things up, question old alliances, and put America's interests first, even if it means stepping on a few toes along the way. So if this goes through, it might set a precedent that reshapes the UK-US partnership for years, possibly decades to come. For Starmer, this veto threat is basically a political migraine that he can't ignore. He's stuck in a spot where he has to balance his promises to Mauritius with the reality that Trump's administration isn't going to take this lightly. On one hand, Starmer's got his political promise to follow through on the agreement with Mauritius, which means a lot diplomatically, not just for the UK, but for its image on the world stage. But on the other, he's facing pressure from Trump's administration, not to mention the domestic heat from figures like Farage and Patel, who are accusing him of jeopardizing British interests. This isn't just a tough policy choice for Starmer, it's a defining moment that could shape his entire legacy as Prime Minister. If he stands his ground, he'll be seen as a leader willing to stick to his principles, even when facing immense pressure from one of the UK's most powerful allies. But if he caves, he risks looking weak, like a leader who couldn't hold his own under American pressure. And let's not ignore the internal Labour dynamics here, because if he's seen as capitulating to Trump, there's bound to be fallout within his own party, which is already divided on a lot of issues. Alright, buckle up, because if Trump pulls the trigger on this veto, it's not just an island dispute. We're talking about a potential tidal wave of fallout across defence, trade and diplomacy that's got some pretty high stakes. So picture this, The UK and the US have this close-knit defense relationship, practically sewn together by years of joint operations and intel sharing. Now, if Trump moves forward with the veto, that whole dynamic could face some serious turbulence. Think about it. Diego Garcia isn't just a random military base. It's a major strategic asset, and Trump's making it clear that anyone messing with it could face some unintended consequences. And it doesn't end at Diego Garcia. We're talking about potential hiccups in everything from intelligence sharing pipelines to strategic defense planning. Imagine a UK defense meeting where they're suddenly wondering if their American allies are about to hit pause on critical intel just to make a point about this island. Yeah, it's that serious. But wait, it doesn't stop with defense. Trade's in the crosshairs too. The UK and the US have been working on a free trade deal for what feels like forever, but this veto could give it a whole new twist. Trump's administration could be thinking, why not use the trade deal as a little leverage here? In other words, the US might just dangle trade terms over the UK's head like, hey, we'll give you this, but let's talk about those islands first. So suddenly, it's not just about exporting goods across the pond, it's about security terms, strategic commitments, and America First trade clauses that might keep UK negotiators awake at night. Trump's team could easily toss this Chagos deal into the mix, treating trade like a bargaining chip, all while the UK's just trying to make some headway on an agreement. And of course, it's all wrapped in Trump's unmistakable style of deal-making. Now, the ripple effects aren't limited to the UK-US corner either. NATO, everyone's favourite military alliance, could start feeling the heat from this spat too. The US is basically NATO's backbone, and any friction with the UK could spill over into multilateral discussions about security, defence responsibilities, or even how military resources get allocated. Trump's made it no secret he's not shy about shaking up NATO if he thinks it's in America's best interest, and the Chagos dispute might just be another reason for him to start testing alliances. NATO allies are likely watching this situation closely, probably with a bit of nervous curiosity, to see if Trump's going to turn the whole thing into a power play that ripples across the entire alliance. But let's talk about the broader political context here. This isn't just about defense and trade. There's a whole list of issues on the table between Trump and Starmer's camps. Support for Ukraine. Trump's got strong views there, which Starmer might find tough to navigate. Climate change, different priorities all over. And election interference? Well, let's just say they might not be on the same page. All these points of contention mean this Chagos veto could be the first domino in a series of policy clashes, signalling a rough road ahead for US-UK diplomacy. Now, if Trump gets his way on this veto, what happens next for the Chagos Islands? The UK might be forced to go back to the negotiating table with Mauritius, and let's be real, that conversation probably wouldn't be full of warm fuzzies. Mauritius could feel burned, especially since they thought they had the UK on board with the transfer. And here's where it gets interesting. Mauritius might start looking for new allies. And who's been cozying up to nations all over Asia and Africa? Yep, China. A bitter Mauritius could easily reach out to Beijing for support, potentially giving China yet another foothold near a US military base. It's a geopolitical dance that no one saw coming. Then there's Diego Garcia itself. If Trump's veto forces a UK reassertion of sovereignty, what does that mean for the base's future? Would the US and UK have to renegotiate terms for the base's operations? And more importantly, would the UK even have the political will to keep it as is, knowing that Mauritius is fuming in the background? It's a powder keg of questions, and the answers could redefine American military influence in the Indian Ocean. So here's the kicker. Is Trump's stance on this Chagos deal a signal of his broader strategy, a preview of what America First means this time around? Are future allies going to be looking at the Chagos Islands as an example of how Trump deals with partners who don't toe the line? Because if this is just the opening act, everyone from Europe to Asia might be rethinking their next moves. The stage is set, the stakes are high, and it's anyone's guess where this goes next.